are ready to start the discussion, so I would like to welcome to the panel to the participants in the first session. So we're going to discuss digitalization and digital policies in Southeastern Europe. Jean-Jacques, Mr. Boni, Frederic, Desiree, please.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning to my panelists, and I will introduce them briefly in a minute. My name is Jean-Jacques Sahel. I'm not from Southeastern Europe. I'm just from Southern Europe. I'm from the south of France. So I don't speak the local language. In fact, I don't even speak proper French. In the south of France, we speak a slightly different dialect, and we're proud of it. I've been dealing with internet governance for about 15 years, which doesn't make me very young, and I've done a few different jobs over those 15 years. But it's moments like this, it's settings like SEEDIG, which are going to stay with me beyond this job, because this is more than just for a job. This is seeing this community come together over the past 4 years. Growing in strength has been one of the things that I've enjoyed the most in my current job, and that I will keep an eye on for my next jobs in the future. We were, back in 2014, a few people who are in this room, I think we were 8 or 9 in this little room in London. I've told this anecdote many times, so some of you will have heard it, but we're only about 8 or 9 people in a small room in a hotel like this one in London, just people from the region, plus my colleague Andrea here and I. And we're just thinking, how could we generate dialogue around internet issues, internet policy between people in the region? Because in international discussions on the internet, there's always been people from the region, people from Macedonia, from Serbia, from Slovenia, people like Desiree here, for instance, who's been with us for a number of years. And we thought there is something here. We need to make the most of this hunger, of this desire from people from this region to get involved in internet issues, both internationally but also at a local level. And this is what this opening panel is all about. Really thinking about Southeastern Europe. What do we think about internet policy? What do we think about digitalization? What are the common issues in the region when it comes to the internet and digitalization? What are the sort of policies that we can work on, both at national level, but also maybe at the level of the region? How can we cooperate together? And so we've got a great panel today with very different perspectives to shed some light on all this. So the title of the panel is Digitalization and Digital Policies in SEE, National Priorities and Regional Cooperation. And each of the people on this panel have a slightly different angle, different perspective. And perhaps what we'll do is we'll start with a few introductory remarks, if that's okay with the panelists, and then we'll go into an exchange, questions and answers, and very much a debate with you in the audience. We want to hear also your questions and your thoughts, your comments, your suggestions on this question of digitalization here in SEE, but also how that relates to the international discussions and what can be done at the regional level. So without further ado, I'd like to pass on to Michal Boni. Michal is a leading member of the European Parliament. Before that, he was the Minister of Communications in Poland, I believe. And he is not new to dialogues on internet governance. He was with us in Poland, where we helped to create the Polish IGF, which is now in its 4th or 5th year as well, about the same time as SEEDIG. So another big success in the sort of eastern-ish part of Europe. So, Michal, please go ahead. Tell us what you see as the big challenges and opportunities ahead for digitalization generally, but then specifically in the SEE region, please.
First of all, thank you very much for invitation, because I think it's very important to be in the middle of many discussions, debates, and dialogue. For the future of the internet, for the future of digital development, dialogue, multi-stakeholders dialogue is crucial, because without cooperation of all stakeholders, civic society organizations, business, academia, and administration, I think we will have no possibility to tackle all those challenges and threats and future benefits. When I'm looking at some data of the digital advancement of Southeastern Europe plus countries, I want to express a few points. There is a comparable level of possible participation of population in the internet due to the access to the networks, generally just between 60 to 70%, with better results in the EU countries. It means that the development continues, but it requires more investments, also with orientation at future networks, very high capacity networks, 5G. There is a similar phenomenon as in other European countries, significant internet activities and participation, especially in social media, among young people. It is a good point to start a serious debate on the real digital literacy in these countries, which means the awareness of the privacy and cybersecurity issues, consideration of the unintended consequences of the algorithms-driven social media and information accessibility, knowledge on the dark side of the internet, crucial skills for the further digital development. There is a common problem of the digital gap between people from the rural areas and other regions, and between people with higher incomes and lower, as at the same time between generations. This is a real challenge if we want to avoid the digital division in our societies. And also, there is an increasing group of companies using the digital tools, starting from websites to the more comprehensive instruments allowing for the digital extension of the firms. It is a key task to involve business, especially small, medium enterprises, to the digital revolution. And also there is a huge potentiality for the digital development with governments oriented at these goals. In some countries there are strategies on those issues. But I'm not sure if all stakeholders are equally involved in the common work for the digital future of this part of our continent. All these factors create the needs and expectations of the digital development also addressed to the European Union. I have thought that Commissioner Gabriel will send the video message to you, but I'm not sure if it will be or not. But some words about the European Union involvement in some areas. It's clear that the region has given a lot of attention to digital development in the past year. It started with multi-annual action plan for a regional economic area, goals set by prime ministers at the TRIST summit in July last year. And also we have had the first ever Western Balkans Digital Summit in Skopje in April this year. Main actions addressed to this part of Europe are to establish digital agenda for the Western Balkans, including a roadmap to facilitate lowering the cost of roaming, to support the deployment of broadband in the Western Balkans through integration into the Broadband Competence Office network, to support the development of e-government, e-procurement, e-health, and digital skills in the Western Balkans, to support capacity building in digital trust and security in parallel to efforts to enhance digitalization of industries, to enhance support for the adoption, implementation, and enforcement of the acquis in the area of the digital single market. And I think that those issues as digital connectivity, cybersecurity, digital skills, digitizing traditional industries are crucial for the digital development of this region. But it is visible how important it is to invest in the infrastructure. but I have some concerns related to the real process of catching up the digital opportunities by SEE plus countries, if it will be focused only on this shape of the necessary conditions, means infrastructure. What in addition we need to do? To use the holistic approach and understand the new digital challenges as Internet of Things development, artificial intelligence, human-centric strategy, high-performance computing centers development with participation in building the European network for supercomputers. To realize that all opportunities for the economic and social development will be based on the various kinds of data processing schemes, it is crucial to be prepared with proper level of the cybersecurity and privacy protection, and the strategy of sharing of the data and accessibility of data for machine learning development. To overcome fragmentation at the digital area in Europe, in whole Europe, which means the readiness of the countries to make some decisions at the proper time and in the harmonized way. To promote among society the real benefits and the concrete advantages which will be brought by the digital game changer in Europe, as for instance, the new healthcare paradigm based on e-health, creating the personalized medical services, telemedicine opportunities, more prevention, the way from the hospital-centric model to the hospital. To start with broad program oriented to the digital literacy, addressed to all generations, elderly people also, to focus on preparation all conditions for future 5G investments, and to involve all partners for common work, like in partnership model, to achieve future digital goals using the multi-stakeholders format as SEEDIG is. And finally, the list is long, but in my opinion, the objectives should be more ambitious if we want to join Southeastern Europe plus countries to the new wave of the digital revolution and support them to catch up the new opportunities regarding to the data-driven development as an essential. Of course, at the same time, we want to strengthen links between citizens and give more support to civil society. Therefore, we need you, active, young, open-minded people who recognize the challenges of the new internet era. Moving forward, we need to bring together all parts of the society as it targets the education and active participation of young people throughout the region. I believe that multi-annual financial framework for the European Union future budget, with addressed program of double Erasmus+, including establishment of the Western Balkans Youth Lab, providing space for innovating policy making, will address the needs of young people. So good luck and try to work together, because this is the only way for our future in the European Union, means Europe, because I think that you are, all countries who are now not in the members of the European Union are European, and we need to work together and achieve the same goals at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. We could almost stop the panel here. I think you've said so much. And we have I mean, it's good to hear that there's a Western Balkans roadmap, and I think we need to look into that for the future, see how we can link up with that, make sure that the policymakers, the European Commission officials are talking to the people on the ground, involving civil society, involving business. So let's hear a bit more. Oops. I hope you can hear me okay. It was a bit of echo. Let's hear a bit more from another perspective. I'll now like to pass on to Desiree Milosevic. I mean, you can tell us a bit more about you, but on her day-to-day job is with a company called Affilias, which does domain names like .biz, .info, right? Did I get that?
.info, .mobi, .org, backend.
But I think most importantly, and I'll let her speak in a minute, Desiree has been very active in this region for years. She's been on the board of the very successful .me for Macedonia. She's created ISOC Serbia, and she's been involved in a number of other projects in the regions, such as creating hackathons and other multi-stakeholder gatherings. So she's got great experience both internationally, dealing with international internet governance issues, but also very much in this region for several years. And I think she'll have a great and very practical perspective on what needs to be done, what could be done going forward, and how. Desiree, please.
Thank you for that introduction. Hope I live up to that. So as Michael Bonney has said everything we all wanted to say, I hope I will add something more about the region and what digitalization means for me in this southeastern European region and what really needs to be done to move it forward. I think essentially I would like to say that we all need to build communities, local communities that will cooperate between each other, and there's a lot going on already in that respect, whether it's the technical infrastructure or whether there are new policy forums or internet governance gatherings like SEEDIG. I think what this region needs is really a forum to exchange best internet governance practices, and that would actually accomplish and take in this bottom-up approach, because we should not forget where we come from. We come from, recent transition from socialist countries and very much of a top-down system. So the next generation and the youth is now realizing the power of communities working together and being the one who is shaping the decision and not necessarily making decisions yet, as the multi-stakeholder in this region needs strengthening. Apart from that, digitalization also brings a lot of risks, and I think we mustn't we must keep an open eye to that. And these risks could endanger human rights, as other internet users around the world have witnessed. They can also create strong mechanisms that are developed by both corporate and state actors. And therefore, there's a lot of work that we need to do in this region to address that civil society and internet users get the best platform so that policies that they recommend are actually taken into consideration. Of course, apart from risk, there are many opportunities, and you've spoken about this. There's plenty of skills in the region. There are fantastic, bright examples of cooperation. For example, .me is one of the bright examples of a successful public-private partnership that is really now a global company serving global needs of registrars. And registrants around the world. But talking about infrastructure, it's really important to see that Bosnia and Herzegovina will get their own internet exchange point in a month's time. So a couple of years ago it was Montenegro, Serbia already had one, Slovenia has one, Croatia has one, and there are some other countries, I think Kosovo is getting one, that are dealing with these basic needs to have the infrastructure where the data is exchanged on a local level, so there's some savings. However, with all that said that is going on, and there are a lot of RIPE NCC regional meetings on which I'm a program committee. There are 5 in this region where we're trying to put together a network operators group. We perceive there will be something called SEENOG, Southeastern European Networks Operators Group, where network operators would cooperate and coordinate more. There's also a very, I think, important thing that there is no digital agenda for the Southeastern Europe. There was a recent meeting in Western Balkans in Macedonia in April. They're supposed to come up with conclusions and to forward it to to send their conclusions to the next Digital Assembly, which will take place in Sofia on 26th and 28th of June. And at the moment, we really need to deal with this, I would say, a big issue that there is no agenda. We don't know whether this region needs cutting and lowering roaming fees, whether we need to be part of a euro because some countries are already in Europe, are enjoying that benefits, whether we actually need to get governments to support SMEs, small and medium enterprises, and entrepreneurs, and organize hackathons and makerspaces and those bottom-up communities that pop up here and there, and give them more support, as we've seen some of the Scandinavian countries have done. So that is lacking in my view, and we have other wonderful examples. I think Frederick may talk about chapters of Internet Society that do a lot of work, policy and technical, trying to get users to understand the issues. However, it is really important that we get the digital agenda for the region, how we're going to go forward, how we're going to cooperate, and to send message to Sofia from this forum today. So hopefully we'll have a good discussion. I'll stop here and then I'll give more examples of what we've been doing in the region.
Thank you very much, Desiree. So, yet more elements. Can I just check, maybe a show of hands? How many of you are already on the SEEDIG mailing list? Okay. If you're not, you should join. So that's a great way of staying in touch and continuing this discussion, taking it forward. Now, I'd like to pass on to Adrian, who is from the local business community, one of the maybe the most dynamic companies, I think, in the Slovene market, to give us your perspective on digitalization as a sort of telecom and digital company, please.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. Maybe just couple of words what I was doing last maybe 15, 20 years, so will bring perspective better. I'm from the region. I'm actually from Croatia. I worked as a board member in telecom in Croatia, in Slovenia, in Macedonia, in Bulgaria. So about the CE region, I think from the network or telecom side, kind of have a very good overview of all the countries. Also, I was constitutional member of Croatian Intergovernment Forum, so kind of even from that side. Why I'm telling this? Because I have a little bit different view on these topics. I think all the countries there. If you look, for instance, DESI index, which shows where each country is, there is no shining star in this part of Europe of comparing to high-end Western countries or shining stars of that. So some countries are better in certain things, others are in different things, but in principle, they are from middle down. So this part of the world is behind in kind of digitalization and internetization or whatever you call it. And what are the reasons? Yeah? And I think the reason is not one simple reason, like always, it's ecosystem. We simply don't have ecosystems in this region. An ecosystem is not just a network. Network is one of the probably 3-5 key elements. It's not on the stage in most of the countries. Most of the countries are not in EU, they don't have a funds for rural areas. Some countries like Croatia is in EU, has the funds, but is not using it for rural areas. Slovenia is pretty good at that, but still didn't cover all the rural areas. So it's network. The thing of the network is countries are small, operators are rather small. So if you look, the ARPUs, what customers are paying here, they are lower than in Western Europe. But if you look at the cost of technology, it's at least the same. And since you are talking about smaller volumes, the companies kind of have a bigger cost to build the same network, and they cannot utilize it as well in these bigger Western countries. And then when you come to roaming, then you have cash out. For instance, Croatia, a very touristic country, lost a lot of regulation on interconnection, and it has big cash negative from roaming. And so there is, every country is a little bit specific. But for instance, infrastructure is definitely one. It's the second thing, I think, institutions. All these countries in certain way are very government-centric. If you look the administration of local, regional government administration and people that are actually paid from budget. Then if you look at the number of companies that are still state-owned, you can roughly say that most of these countries have at least more than 50% of everything which is coming from the top. So if somebody is kind of influencing more than 50% of the environment, if he doesn't change, you cannot change the environment. So I think institution really putting on the government somebody CIO for somebody who is really very strict and very has a agenda to move the things very fast, and this has to be top of I don't know, agenda of elections, then we have a better chance. And then the third thing is people. We are talking about youth a lot. I believe youth is digital already in many ways. Yeah? We have to talk about security, about privacy, about education of the youth. But if you look, are they digital? They are digital natives. But we don't have just youth in the countries. And also what's happening with these digital natives, since most of these countries have negative outflow of young people. This is also a big issue. So the most of companies are more and more missing skills to implement digitalization. EU will miss by 2020 million or something people, but countries like UK and Germany can afford the inflow, and these countries, because of standards, usually have outflow. And so this environment, because IT or telecommunication, but IT provincially is kind of horizontal industry. It goes in every vertical sector. And you need to really implement digital view and IT view in every different industry to make the industries and country and governments digitalized. And you need people to do that. So I believe there is, so people, then you need education which will actually fill up the needs of your countries plus the needs of EU, because most of them are going out. So, and there are other things, of course, but this is like kind of top of the mind for me. So if somebody doesn't look this as holistic and doesn't take a view on end-to-end and try to make ecosystem, I think we'll still be behind in these countries, and that's at least my view.
Thank you, Adrian. I think I'm glad, because I thought we were almost finished when Michal had outlined the plan, but now we're getting a bit more detail, a bit more granularity, and I've taken lots of notes, and I hope you're all getting ready to ask questions. But let's hear from Frederic, from his perspective, working at the Internet Society. Maybe you can explain a little bit what the Internet Society does, what the chapters do. That might be helpful as well. Please give us your perspective.
And I will do it from here, because actually from where I was seated, I see only knees and legs. It was a beautiful sight, but here I am. I'm situated on the left side for those who wonder where I come from. I'm very happy to be here today, honestly. You know that the Internet Society has been a strong supporter of SEEDIG since its inception 4 years ago. And saying that this region is characterized by diversity and multiculturality seems like a truism, but yet it's reality. This is the best place to discuss internet governance. This is a rich country. And as everybody has said already, we have a vibrant community here, an ISOC vibrant community. 11 chapters, very active, lot of very smart guys. They work on a lot of different issues that tell us a lot, but of course, they work on access, e-literacy, skills, privacy, security, network neutrality. I'm smiling, we discussed that yesterday with our Serbian chapter. So yes, a lot of youth and vibrant communities working in this region, and it's helped a lot to better understand what it is that we should be discussing with the other stakeholders, governments coming first in mind. The topics I would like to address, and I will be brief, are certainly issues that are challenges in these regions, but not only. But some of them might resonate, particularly in Southeastern Europe. First, of course, this is about digital skills. You need to make sure that people can embrace this new digital agenda, if ever it exists in some countries, but that people can catch up with this new world and illiteracy skills. Secondly, the region is marked by a high level of entrepreneurs. You need to create the right environment for entrepreneurs and young entrepreneurs. And this is a lot to do here, honestly. You need to create a sustainable environment for those entrepreneurs to do their job and create rather than be consumers. It's also about removing barriers to cross-data flows, cross-border data flows. It's important. People need to have access to the whole internet to start competing at worldwide level, not just national or regional level. And last but not least, certainly competition policies are something very important. We know the presence and dominance sometimes of some platforms. You need to make sure that people can compete with those big platforms and have a say in this world. I'd like to finish my remark with something that is really close to my heart, and talking about skills and environment. The Balkans are still the net or the top level exporters of educated people in the world, in the new European Union. That is brain drain, right? Just talking about Skopje in Macedonia, I've seen figures, hallucinating figures recently released by the Skopje Institute for Research and Education in December 2017, saying that 69% of people of Macedonia wanted to leave Macedonia for better opportunities elsewhere. You have Bosnia and Herzegovina, where the same kind of survey has been made. We're talking about 3.8 million people, half of them saying that they're ready to leave the country. Serbia is set to lose $9 billion just about well-educated engineers and people in the tech sectors leaving the country. 9 billion lost. Kosovo, we have here one of the countries with the highest level of young people. There too are saying that they see their futures elsewhere. What is it that I'm trying to say? It's just not only about skills, it's about creating the right environment at national level for people to be entrepreneurs and stay and be able to contribute. So yes, it's about a digital agenda, but it's also about an innovation agenda, and it's also about an entrepreneurship agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And another layer of useful thinking here. I've got more questions myself, but I'd like to go ahead and already open to the audience, because that's what we're here for. This is a dialogue. So I'll just take this microphone and I will start walking down the alley to see who's got questions or comments. Maybe I'll just, whilst you think about your questions, I'll just remind you of some of the things that we've heard. We've heard that there is a Western Balkans agenda that's been discussed in April that should be communicated to the big EU Digital Assembly that's taking place in Sofia in June. We've heard that there are some countries in the region that have digital agendas, but not all of them. We've heard very strongly, I think, that there are a lot of skills, of opportunities here, but also a lot of challenges, brain drain, basically the lack of an ecosystem, but possibly the need for an innovation and entrepreneurship agenda. And I think all of this, if I put it all together, it's already, what I've heard is already providing us with a great roadmap. So I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts, feedback, and questions on the various themes that we've heard about, from skills to connectivity to some of the other issues like net neutrality or privacy or cybersecurity, and also, okay, what do we do next? And we've got 2 days to discuss it, so a lot of the panels will go into detail on all of that, but I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on that. So who wants to make a start? Yes, Valentina.
Morning, Valentina. Live in Bosnia, but I'm an Italian migrant. Means I can go wherever I want, and people usually don't ask too many questions. My question is very simple. Where are rights? Where are rights in this region? And when I say region, beyond the Western Balkans. We have the companies, local and international, but there is no reflection on citizens' rights. And there is no reflection of LGBT and women's rights. Access. There is so much violence. We can see people somehow taking care of hate, if hate is based on nationalism or on ethnicity, but if it's just against the usual women, because we exist, or the usual LGBTIQ, because we exist, there is silence. Many of the countries in the region are highly homophobic, and they consider also, because there is the access of religion and faith. So I just would like to know where are rights in our agenda, because this is my agenda as an activist.
Thank you. We hadn't really raised that one. Anyone who would like to pick up on that? I mean, that's a really important point. Any immediate reactions from the panel? Michal, please.
You know, when we are discussing about the internet, we need to discuss about the space for freedom, because internet was established as a space for freedom, and it gave freedom of expression, freedom of sharing the information, accessibility to many different various sources of information. And I think that we need to keep this value, to keep the freedom of the internet, because it's related to our rights and it's related to our freedom. So when we are talking about privacy protection, it's also discussion about our rights. When we are talking about security and cybersecurity, we are also talking about rights. And of course, when you are asking about LGBT rights and asking about women's rights, I fully agree. I'm from Poland, and it was clear for me from 1989. I was also involved in Solidarność many years. It was clear from 1989 that we are going forward. But now, after election 2015, the rightists change the model of authority, and we are discussing again on women's rights. We are discussing about discrimination. We are discussing about freedom, because democracy's freedom is not guaranteed for every time. So we need to fight. How we can use internet. If we will create some groups, if we will be together, if we will fight for some freedoms at the area of internet, I think it is very important. And now we are discussing all over the Europe about fake news and misinformation. And there are some answers, some responses from some countries that, okay, it would be great to have some kind of censorship. But censorship doesn't solve any problem. We need to cooperate together. We need to work together. We need to signal that something is the example of the case of misinformation. We need to exchange our views. We need to talk about education. And education is one of the key issues. Because when we are talking about education adjusted to the future development of our societies and of our economies, we need to talk about skills, but digital skills. But if we are talking about education, we need also to talk about critical thinking and open minds. So I agree with you that when we are talking about digital agenda, and when we are talking about digital agenda in the area of education, we need to talk generally, more generally about educational challenges for the future, which means freedom, full tolerance, and full respect for all rights, all people.
Just want to say, I think there is a mismatch between regulation in countries as it is with the new technologies. And I don't want to comment our company because we promote all the rights, but I will tell on the network side of our company, or on the internet, let's say, I will just tell the fact that more than 50% of all data over our network, mobile, fixed, whatever, 50 plus, I don't want to say the number, is just 2 companies control. And they are not from this region, and they are not controlled, or they're not regulated, or whatever. They don't pay taxes here, they don't pay whatever. So we are not in the same battlefield. And this opens the completely different story of net neutrality. Is it necessary? But kind of, we are building networks, but ownership of data on that network is with somebody else. And he has the power to control or not control what's there.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for raising that point, since we are in this data exploration and surveillance marketing era. And I think, thank you also, Valentina, for raising that question about human rights, because I said digitalization also brings some risks that impact human rights. And whether it's a corporate control of the network or a state control, I think what we need is some kind of rebalancing. But there are also different cultural ideas and different mindsets that we need to shift together with the digital agenda, whether it means being more tolerant, being conservative in what you put out, being more acceptance of what you take in. So there's all this culture change and a bit of a mindset that I think people who are global internet users understand that if you live in a big village, which is our country, we need to give in and take in to make the world go around. But in terms of human rights, there is, I think, more work that needs to be done in this region than maybe in other places. So that's definitely need to be kept on the agenda.
Thank you. And I should mention that when we had our first brainstorm, I mentioned in London 4 or 5 years ago, the questions of online freedoms and content control came strongly as relevant to this region with different layers. I think it's both about sort of political surveillance, but also indeed the power that some companies might have, and also generally how users behave on the internet. On human rights, I think this is probably both a local question, but also one that's got more of an international and European ramification, with issues such as fake news, disinformation, how to tackle illegal content, the responsibility of platforms. A lot of work happening on that in Brussels, but I don't think there's yet a proper answer. I think on human rights, one of the very important principles that's been discussed over the years in internet governance is that rights or regulation offline should apply in the same way online. Your fundamental rights shouldn't be different just because they are online. But the problem or the difficulty, if you want, the challenge, and it's not just a challenge of human rights, is that even if the basic values and the basic laws remain the same, we need to reinterpret, re-understand, if you want, how to apply regulation in the online world. And we haven't done that yet. Instead, I think, that is a personal opinion, I think a lot of people are rushing to put together new laws that are specific to the internet, rather than thinking, what are our existing laws telling us and how should we reinterpret it in the internet context? So there's a lot more work to be done, and that's definitely something to add to the report of this session, and maybe even sort of starting to think about our own agenda. You've seen on the slide here, we've got 2 rapporteurs, Maya and Catalin, who are taking copious notes of this meeting, and hopefully with their help we can streamline that into a report that will go both to EuroDig, the European Dialogue on Internet Governance, but also the Global Internet Governance Forum, and perhaps the Digital Assembly as well. So all these important points. But let's move on. I'm sure there's other questions for the audience, please.
Nikola Ogninovski, Makedonski Telecom. So in the recent study presented in Digital Summit in Skopje, one of the main conclusions was that there was really serious digitalization gap between the countries in the region compared to the EU. We know that the main precondition for decrease of digitalization gap is connectivity and access to NGN. So what is the best solution based on your opinion, or best remedy for this region, having in mind economic situation and that this region, most of the countries has no access to European funds. So what should be the solution in order this gap to be decreased? So thank you.
I'm sure you've got a few things to say on that. Yeah, please.
Well, if anyone is taking, it's interesting that the question's coming from a telecom operator in the country asking about access, but nevertheless, I think it's an important question to address. And one of the reasons, one of the ways, I think, that this issue needs to be addressed is obviously by having an agenda when you plan to have a coverage by which year you would like to have coverage in the whole of Macedonia. And I'm not familiar exactly what the financial difficulties are or resources that are lacking. One of the things that the Internet Society promotes are community networks, something that we all know that anyone can connect to the internet if you have some machine, and I think what we need is some kind of licensing, probably of spectrum, so that people could form their own community networks and get easier access to the backbone, and to promote that as many people get connected. I think we understand that 5G is going to be costly, and some of the mobile devices are the way most of the rural areas are covered, but broadband initiative has not really, I think, taken off as a big issue in cooperation in this region. As we heard, we have dominant players in some of the markets that have access to the government that then forget to look at the competition and the promotion of the local business and the local operators. The good thing is that we get internet exchange points, but I think some of my colleagues may have a better answer for you.
Thank you, Desiree. Me again, hiding in my eastern side. Yes, Desiree, thank you for saying before I would. It's interesting that the question comes from a telecom operator. We've been in discussions with many stakeholders in the past in many different regions. Access is an ecosystem. It means that you need to have a really broad view in terms of regulation, legislation, in terms of the environment in which you make the investment. There are alternative ways to connect people, not just going with a cable or optical fiber. You have different ways. You need to have legislations that can adapt to those different ways to connect people. You need to have the conversation that we have today, and that is making sure that the regulator is in the room listening to the different needs of those who are ready to go in a partnership between private and the public sector. So you got all different components for access, and I believe we need to stop thinking only in terms of investment from one stakeholder. Michel?
If I can add something, when we are discussing in the European Union countries now about 5G investments and 5G infrastructure, one of the key issues is to avoid fragmentation. So decisions done by particular member states in not adequate time. We need to harmonize the process of making decisions. Very often, member states, and I think that also in this region, countries, prefer the situation in which they are individually, particularly as countries, as nations, as governments, are taking the decision. If it would be possible to coordinate decisions and to take some decisions at the proper time and consider how important it would be to cooperate by operators, by all proper investors to develop the networks in all regions. I think it will be easier, it will be cheaper, and it will guarantee the access to all people at the same time. Relatively, of course, same time. So avoid the fragmentation in this region, I think. This is we need political will, yes, because governments could decide about this issue. And it's related to basic infrastructure. But on the other hand, I think, and I wanted to express it in my first intervention, that when we are talking about the future of internet, we need to develop different kinds of infrastructure. We need to have high performance computing networks. We need to process the data. And it doesn't mean that, okay, the data will be processed in Germany, in France, and so on, but not in Skopje, not in Ljubljana, not in Belgrade, and so on. I think that it will be very important for all Europe, for all Europe, because as you have mentioned, this is a holistic challenge. IT and digital will be in every sector, in every part of our life. So we need to be open for different kind of infrastructure. And I hope that when we are talking about this strategy should have two sides. First, how European Union can support, also giving money for some investments, giving money for some feasibility studies and so on. But on the other hand, how a region could strengthen the cooperation to take those opportunities and challenges.
Just there is European directive that actually says that allowance to access or to ground or tubes or whatever for a new generation network should be kind of at the cost level and promoting to invest, right? But this is kind of not passed in the laws in this kind of part of the countries, and you have a lot of infrastructure which is governmental companies, incumbents, and everything else, and it's not accessible. Not accessible, it's accessible in some countries, some even not, but if it's accessible, it's under pretty big cost, which is not promoting that smaller operators to pull fiber through existing ducts. They have to dig. When they have to dig, it's too expensive, then they don't do it. Then you get EU money, which is all our money, promoting it. There is a cheaper way. So I think the allowance of existing infrastructure to speed up, to really give it at a lower cost, to promote the build out of new generation network. And we're not talking about center of Ljubljana, of course, but every country is big and it's not a metropolitan area. You know, there is a lot of things, and I think there is a key how to really enforce what there is already in EU legislative, to enforce it in this area. It would speed up investments, I believe.
Thank you. I just wonder if we have someone from a telecom regulator or government ministry in the room. We often do at SEEDIG, but I don't know if there's any today. Yes. Did you want to say a few things?
Greetings, everybody. My name is Kristin Goshi. I'm the head of the regulator of Kosovo. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm really happy to see some encouraging discussions here about the possible cooperation in the future in Balkans. As the issue of roaming agreement is now very current in the region, I would like to raise a question on this matter and to see if there's the agreement between the countries or the agreements that will be in place between countries will help to the future agreements with EU at the EU level. We know that the impact of the roaming agreement have had in some countries, and I would like to hear a little bit more on Croatian example, but I am also in particular interested to see from the kind of European perspective if that area will be open soon to the Balkans as well. Thank you.
Michal, I think you were at the meeting and it was in April. Do you remember how far is or how advanced is the discussion on enabling free roaming, even with the non-EU countries in this region?
You know, there are two dimensions of the problem. Firstly, proper economic analysis addressed to the operators active in this region, because roaming means that it is a fantastic solution for people, for users, but very often it's not so good solution, especially in the first period for operators. It depends on the relationship between prices between European Union countries as Germany, France, and this part of Europe. In Poland, for example, of course, we decided, because it is European regulation, to start with roaming, but the first year for operators was that they need to add some money, yes, and it was a loss. It was a loss not profit for them. So we need to consider it, yes, and find the proper balance. It would be great if all regulators and all representatives of governments could discuss together about this issue. And I think that the question addressed to the European Commission also should be clear. How to make it without losing the economic position of operators. Why? Because operators should also have the possibility and opportunity for the future to invest in the new infrastructure. Yeah? So we don't need to kill them now fighting only on roaming. The second issue is in some areas to strengthen the cooperation. I'm sorry, I don't know what is the cooperation between Balkans regulators, all Balkans regulators, with European BEREC, yes? Because BEREC is for European Union member states, yes? But I think that it should be clear when we are discussing about dialogue, when we are discussing about openness, yes? To create the background for inviting regulators from Balkan countries, also from those countries who are not the members of the European Union, to participate in the work of BEREC. I think it will be clear and it will be success for the future. Yes? So two issues, economic analysis related to the roaming and the European Union support, and stronger cooperation at the level of BEREC, because this is a European body in which you can exchange views of regulators.
Couple of things, and that is, let's compare some EU telecom operators that currently operate in the countries of EU. So the roaming fees could be as low as whatever they are, yet in the southeastern European region, we have roam back as at home, €2.50 for a roaming fee instead of a few cents. So I would think that those operators operating in this region with the set skills that they have here locally and the cost of labor would actually be in a much better position to offer better roaming charges than what we have now. I'm not talking about local operators who need support in this first period to build networks, but I definitely think there's a room to really consider harmonization and limiting the roaming fees for the southeastern European region, and that with some feasibility studies you mentioned and help of EU should be on our agenda as that moves forward, the fee.
Let me you asked about Croatian experience, so I was there for like 10 years, so I was part of that. Actually, I think Croatia is really good experience to learn from it, from countries that will come later. I think it's first to know which country actually has inflow or outflow. Because of Croatia economy, which is not some of great economies of this world, actually maybe a few 100,000 people a year from Croatia goes out and 20 million come in because of tourism. Yeah? So what actually happened? Also there was a recession time, and kind of Croatia going in EU was still recession in Croatia, and it all came to the one point. So Croatia, if you look at 2001, 2002, it was one of first GPRS networks at the time, then 2006-2007, one of the first countries, top 5 countries in Europe that were covered by good coverage of 3G network. And then 2007-2008, few polls of LTE, and then everything stopped. And there was a big gap in like 5-6 years of investment. So what was happening? There was recession, there was this EU regulation coming into place, and out of 3 operators in Croatia, which altogether earn maybe one operational flow, I don't know, 400 million euros, half of that was vanished. Half. And then suddenly the 2 out of 3 companies, except the incumbent 2 companies, didn't actually have cash, because EBITDA minus capex, they didn't have enough cash to build a network. and this was a fact. And one still has a problem. One get out of it. And actually, the LTE coverage started really nationwide coming in 2014-15. So I think it's 6, 7 years or 5 years at least delayed. Today, what's happening? It's a very short touristic season, so a lot of people come on very short period of time, couple of months, on very small places. Yeah? So what's happening on that place is peak of data consumption year over year grows 16, 17, 76%. So you have to build one more network. And instead, actually, every year you have to build capacity-wise one more network, and you cannot really charge it a lot because ARPUs are small, interconnection and roaming tariff are so. So there is kind of, and it's not sustainable. And I believe 5G, when it comes, it will again be delayed. So there are, and London is different, you know. It's a metropolis, you come in, you come out, you have a local business. So I think roaming is good for EU, one market, digital market. I think it's a great thing, but I think it didn't take in count specifics of kind of smaller country which have issue with it. Yeah? So that's kind of something that was Croatia government or EU or somebody was missing for this kind of countries. And I'm sure the Croatia is not the only one, but on a local market, it had, I would say, a negative impact on investment, which then the local customer also didn't get, and you know, outflow of cash from a country.
Thank you. I see there's a question, but I'm just. Is that a follow-up question? Yeah. Yes.
I'm sure it's a follow-up. Okay. Frederick actually, according to me, touched at the heart of the problem when he mentioned, okay, my name is Tanja Pavlejska, I come from Jožef Stefan Institute. So, but for me, that was an essential point about how much young people want to leave the countries, and then what is the purpose of all these mechanisms we're creating and implementation plans and everything, if the only ones that will stay in the countries are the implementers themselves, right? And the first speaker mentioned about critical thinking, and I think these two relate, because when we talk about increasing awareness through education of digitalization, you cannot do it if the educational system itself is degraded. And this goes back to the political and economic situation in general in one country, because digitalization is something we are moving forward to. But behind ourselves, we have a context within which we've been living for quite a long time that is preventing many of the future plans to be implemented in the first place. And what I'm missing is the connection to the general political situation in the countries that would make the ground fertile enough for all of these. I mean, engineers are not the problem. We have, in the region, we have bright minds, we have plenty, and I wouldn't say that we don't know how, but we just don't see the purpose of it. And that is why young people want to move out. And I'm one of these young people that moved out from Macedonia, for example. So parallel to the digital agenda should be a discussion on where this digital agenda provides the purpose of improving the current political and economic system in the country. Something that I was missing in the debate. And this goes back to human rights. I mean, human rights is a general term. If we start dividing their domain on women's rights and on LGBT rights, then something is not good. Human are human. I mean, if the debate goes into several, but this is just another debate for me. That's the first remark, just political debate parallel to.
Thank you. So I think it's quite clear there needs to be a link between a digital agenda and a broader economic and political agenda. Otherwise, it's not going to go anywhere. I think it's well-made point. Other questions? I think we've got a few more minutes. We've got about 5 minutes. So, other questions, please, or comments, or your own thoughts. You want to start a revolution? No.
Hello, my name is Cătălin Vrabia. I'm from National University of Political Studies and Public Administration in Romania. So I'm representing academia. I am also a rapporteur for this session, but I will come with that later on. I do have a question. Do you have any examples of policies that have been adopted to prevent brain drains? I'll give an example from Romania, the country, as I said, I'm coming from. Many years ago, IT specialists were accepted from paying taxes. Well, that would have been better probably to expand that to medical doctors, to teachers. I'm a teacher, so I might be very subjective. However, do you have any example of some policies more or less different or similar with this one in the region? Thank you.
Does it work? Yeah. Thank you for these questions. Since linked to what Tanya, you just said, thank you for those comments as well. Well, I believe that the first issue is to recognize it. I believe that in the Balkans, this is still a taboo question to discuss those issues. So I believe governments need to recognize that there is an issue. You realize that now we're touching upon a broader picture, a political picture. This is the limit of what we can do in a conversation on internet governance. So I feel at the border of something that goes beyond what we are willing to discuss. But yes, there are a lot of different policies that you could put in place. I'm interested to hear that you come from Romania, because indeed, what I describe, and by the way, this is one of your colleagues, Michal, Tanya Fajon from Slovenia, who said that recently as well, that the regions will continue to be brain drained, and the causes are well known, not only economics, but political, religious chauvinism, corruption, all those issues that I believe need to be addressed as well. Yes, there are issues also in countries that are part of the European Union. This is interesting. Membership to the European Union, Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia, didn't stop this. Where are the highest level of IT and engineers from Croatia working? Germany. So there are policies that needs to be put in place. I mentioned some of those. This is a broader reflections. But yes, you need to sustain entrepreneurship in your own country. You need to solve issues of a higher political level that I just mentioned, but that is the big picture. So yes, we need to touch upon those big issues as well. I'm not sure this is the right place here, but I would really invite this platform to make sure that this is on the top of the agenda. Thank you.
I think we have time for maybe one more question, if there is. But many of the following sessions will go into more detail on some of the elements we touched. One thing that's come out quickly, I might have actually a final question, but not for the panelists. Maybe if he's happy with it, from our colleague from the Kosovo regulator. Well, I mean, connectivity was one of the big topics here, and we talked on BEREC. So there is a group called the International Regulators Group, IRG, which is much broader than BEREC, but I'm not sure if it's the right setting. So I wonder if you already have a dialogue between the regulators of the Southeastern European region, and whether you do or not, could we envisage having that dialogue, but bringing in also some of the other stakeholders, the technical community, the business, etc., to inform the regulators and help them to make sure that as we look to 5G, to IoT, etc., the region is well prepared.
Well, I must start from a development that happened before 10 days or so in Sofia, where the presidents of the Western Balkan countries signed a declaration where they agreed that the regulators have to come together and agree a plan to work together in all the matters that relate to each other, including the 5G. As regarding BEREC and IRG, there is a kind of formal clause that all candidate countries for EU, official candidate countries for EU are invited there, but countries that are not formally candidate, such as Kosovo and Bosnia, are not automatically invited there. So, I mean, we are facing that problem. We all aim to be part of EU and become candidate countries eventually, very soon. But this is creating some problems with us. We do participate in some SEPT groups at the expert level, but I would think that participating in BEREC, and I think that there is also kind of space in the legal aspect that the chair of BEREC can invite also other non-members if necessary, would be a good opportunity. But I really am optimistic that now the digital kind of inclusion of Western Balkans in EU is a very top priority in a way for the Balkan countries, and I hope that there will be a concrete results soon. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to hear there's progress. I think, Michal, did you want to say a few more words?
Just the final comment, because I think that it is a real problem, this phenomenon of brain drain. In Poland, after 2004, when we have started to be members of European Union, it was a very big wave of young people going to, especially to United Kingdom, and after and many of them to Ireland. We have stopped it, and now because of many reasons some of them are coming back. But I think that what is important for many governments to create clear policies and also to present some visions for the future. And digital issues are very good component of the future vision. So if we will have this digital vision for Western Balkans, if in all countries we will have digital strategy, but digital strategy not only focused on technical issues, yes, roaming, infrastructure and so on, but also on people, with opening some possibilities, some new opportunities for them to use digital tools, to establish businesses and so on and so on. So I think it will be the incentive, yes, and we need to consider it. On the other hand, we need to remember that the European Union, and for some countries as Romania and so on, we have, it's clear that we are supporting the freedom of movement, of labor movement, of humans movement. So there are the decisions done by individuals, but the climate, the environment, the ecosystem should be created by the governments. I'm not sure if in any European countries we have proper policies addressed to the young generation. We are talking about it, but I think that there are many, many problems with them. There are only words, words, and words. So I think this is one issue for future consideration during the next panel.
And that's probably quite a good concluding sentence here. We need action beyond the words, and that is true, I think, for all these digital agendas, those papers that are being sent to big conferences. It's very nice to have the papers, but we need action on the ground. I'm counting on our rapporteurs to make a great summary later on. I think there's a lot of food for thought. I think from what we've heard here and comments and questions from the audience, we've already got like a manifesto. We've got a roadmap. I think it's very helpful. I'm taking from a process perspective, something really important is we really need to have, I think it's really good to have this dialogue between stakeholders. We've got business here, we've got civil society, we've got tech community, and luckily we've got Michal and a few parliamentarians in the room. But I really think we need to make sure we have this dialogue with the government authorities and the regulators, both within SEEDIG, but also maybe on a specific basis. So for instance, this idea of having the Western Balkan regulators coming together, I think this is wonderful, but perhaps we can add to that by bringing in stakeholders into the discussion to inform future policies. So we'd love to help with that before even the next SEEDIG. So I will stop with that. I think I want to thank very much Michal, Desiree, Adrian, and Frederick. plenty more time to discuss all these issues in more detail over the next 2 days, also during the breaks. I want to thank the tech team who are already doing a great job. Thank you, guys. And our rapporteurs who are doing a great job. They must be doing, because they've been typing furiously. So with that, I'll pass back on to Sorina, I think, to guide us to the break. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Jacques. We actually should be hearing the messages now. That's a tradition at SEEDIG. Our rapporteurs are reading some of the key messages and asking you if you agree with them. So we'll have 2 more minutes for that. Cătălin, Maya, please. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, my colleague here, Maya, wrote 4 pages. I will, only on this session. I will summarize that. The first idea is cybersecurity awareness is very important for proper development of the IT world, especially if we are to look at the increased number of users of the social media platform. Are you agree with this sentence? Just raise your hand and we will consider, we will count. We can take that as being a yes. Okay, IoT and artificial intelligence, there are rather new concepts that should be seen in a very holistic way, especially taking into consideration the digital divide. This term, digital divide, tends to increase based on the high speed of the technical evolution. Are you agree with this statement from the panelist statement? Not ours necessarily, but we agree with. Yes, now going to the yes, brain drain. My colleague is saying the society today, especially in this region, is built on a government-centric framework, and by that, a rather new phenomenon rised up: the brain drain. We have to change the environment in order to cope with this. Are you agree with? Yes. Well, it's not that new, but it's not all too. Regarding the IT world is. Okay, and one more. Digitalization brings new risks, but a lot of opportunities. The panelists, as well as us, consider that this new concept should be more in focus by governments. They need to support by organizing hackathons or similar events. Do you have an agreement on that? Okay, so we had four key points, and we all have had an agreement with this. My colleague Maya will publish the rest of 3.5 pages on the SEEDIG website. Thank you very much.
Break, like 20 minutes. Thank you. 20 minutes.